I'm going to call the meeting to order. Will the board secretary take the roll?
Mr. Jim Bard.
Here.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Here.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Here.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Here.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Here.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Here.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Here.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Here.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Present.
Mr. Ariane Gonkar.
Here.
Miss Lily Kell.
Here.
Okay, will everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Flags a little more like. As we begin our deliberations this evening, let us once again be reminded of our duty to represent all of the children in this school community, regardless of age, sex, race, or creed, and regardless of need or ability. May we now have a moment of silence to reflect on our thoughts, plans, and actions on behalf of the students of the Shippensburg School District. Thank you. Dr. Moyer, are there any changes to the agenda?
Thank you, President Butterball. There are a couple of items. Under the consent agenda, can you hear me back there? Am I close enough? Thanks. Number 8, Hannah L. Hooper, added as a long-term substitute. We missed the terminology of long-term there. Under the action agenda, 5D, we revised the Conceptual Design Services Agreement with EI Associates. We amended the wording to include programs at all educational buildings in the district and provide an update to the enrollment study. Cost remains the same. 5E, removal of Athletic Improvements Design Services Agreement with K&W Engineers. District is looking to provide K&W with refined information to provide a different proposal. And then finally, 5F, we removed the middle school GESA amendment, GESA. This amendment will be brought with the general construction pricing in October. Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I just gotta make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion made by Mr. Scott. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Goetz. Roll call.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christy. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to those who are on watching it on YouTube. Welcome to the school board meeting. We have 2 public comment sections for our board meeting. The first section is right now. That's if you have a public comment regarding any item that is listed on the agenda. Then at the other end of the meeting, we have another public comment section where we welcome comments on any and other items that you wish to address the board. So we're going to move into the comment section here for agenda items. If you do have a public comment, please come up to the podium and the microphone. State your name and address and whether you are a district resident, and the board welcomes your comment. Is Leah here? Leah Fleming? You don't have a comment? Okay. Does anybody have a comment regarding an agenda item? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Keith Swartz, 411 William Drive. I am a resident of the Shippensburg School District, and I just wanted to say that last week I was misquoted. The borough does have an open mind with regard to an artificial turf field at the park, and Jerry Lee Davis is also here, and she was also misquoted that we do have an open mind.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Move on to reports. Franklin County Career Center report. Mr. Burt?
Well, thank you very much. Just a couple of items today. First of all, our last meeting of the Franklin County Career and Technology Center Joint Operating Committee took place this past Thursday evening, at which point in time the administration of the school pointed out that we have the highest enrollment historically that the school's ever seen. We currently have 1,078 students enrolled, And although not official, the board has directed the administration there, much like some of the discussions that we're beginning to have here at Shippensburg, to begin looking at how we could increase the space of the school and or add programs and what that might look like, how we plan for growth at the school going forward. So more to come with that, but we have currently the highest enrollment in the school historically. Number two, I've given to Dr. Moyer a few of the pamphlets from Williamson College of the Trades, and they've been given to the Career Center and to for counselors here, but just as an opportunity or option. But the long-term board member, Dr. Tom Enderline, who served 6 terms on the Shippensburg board, is on the board there, and he provided this information. And Williamson College of the Trades, if we have a student perhaps that's interested in going there, they operate on a fellowship basis, which means if it would meet your needs as a student, you could conceivably go to college at Williamson College of the Trades and come out with no cost and no debt, because they operate on a fellowship basis. And then the final thing that I want to mention tonight is that the board approved in our last meeting, and we've been talking about the potential to revise the Articles of Agreement for the operation of the school, and of course that will be coming to, we approved them, and they'll be coming to each of the boards of the sending districts. The first time the original Articles of Agreement for the incorporation, the operation and management of that school, dates back to 1967. And I would just like to mention that every time I go to the school and I look at the plaques, I think about the job that we do here and the jobs that have been done through the interim. But I think about the folks that were involved in that school from the very beginning. The people that when there was no building and there was no school, that crafted this idea in their minds and did the work to make this a fruition. They built out of nothing something that we're extremely proud of today, and something that we're able to, we pay 16% of the budget, we pay 16% of the debt, and yet we're able to afford our students in Shippensburg all of the access to all of the programs that are offered there. So I just want to say one more time, I stand in amazement when I think about the starting from scratch approach and to dreaming and realization of a dream, to not by looking in the rearview mirror or determining where we've been, but finding the way to go where we've never been before. And I'm awed in that, and I encourage this board to continue to, as we look at unraveling the challenges that we have, both for facilities, for educational and for athletic facilities, that we consider that too, that the job that the people that came before us, to envision someplace that they've never been before and find a way to go there again. The original Articles of Agreement were adopted in 1967, and we will be making, when we make this move, we will be making the 6th Amendment to the Articles of Agreement, the way in which we operate that school. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burt. Before we move on to board and committee reports, the board met in executive session at 6:30 this evening. We met for a contractual issue to review the contract for the new superintendent, which is on the agenda for this evening. Moving on to board committee reports. Ms. Wolfinger, do you have an outreach committee report?
I do. So Monday we had our first little kind of session together, Dwayne and Steph and I, along with Dr. Moyer. And basically what we wanted to establish, since it was the very first meeting, kind of our groundwork. And so we kind of determined the purpose of what the outreach committee was going to be about, which in a nutshell is to build and collaborate with local partners to further the district and community agendas. And ultimately our goal that we kind of worked through was to work to improve the overall experience of our students through meaningful partnerships while maintaining fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers. So with that being said, we got kind of straight to work last week. And on Thursday, we had a meeting, the committee and Dr. Moyer, and also Mr. August met with Dr. Patterson, Mr. Aloisi, Mr. Lowe, and Mr. Michaels. And I just wanted to say thank you guys for having us there. We definitely appreciated your flexibility and interest in scheduling the meeting so soon. I think we established a great groundwork of how the district can partner with the university to serve the needs of the students in a potential short-term or a long-term way, if that worked out to be that way. Where not perfect, I think what will take us further is the constant conversation and willingness to talk through. But I can say I was very happy to hear Dr. Patterson's commitment to both our district needs, but also the communities as a whole, as an all-in kind of approach. Many questions we all had, and concerns as well. As we know, that's going to be part of a normal conversation if we're pursuing that way. But what I loved is that as of today, we already received answers back from the university to answer a lot of the questions that we kind of left that conversation with. So I really appreciated their kind of sense of urgency with getting answers and responses to us, which Dr. Moyer and Mr. August, I did forward those responses today to you guys. I think the key is for us to all be open-minded and know that there are no perfect solutions, but there are several ideas that I think can help us to ease the burden of our current situations, and it will take all of us partnering together to do that. So I definitely, just really, again, wanted to say thank you to them. I look forward to open conversations with them going in the future, and just kind of seeing how we can serve short-term needs as we've been discussing. I think we all kind of recognize that once we commit to something at the school district as far as the stadium goes, we're going to have a period of time where we're going to need some facilities for our children, for athletics. And so, their willingness was definitely met, with great respect. Friday, we met with the borough and the Park Authority, and I wanted to say thank you to Keith Swartz, Kevin Placer, Mike Fagg, Sandy Maley, and Jerry Davis for meeting with us again. On Thursday morning, I woke up to voicemail, and it was one that I, cannot say that I wanted to hear, but with that voicemail came a conversation and a willingness from the borough and the Park Authority to immediately have a conversation with us to kind of clear the air. I want to preface this, that our conversations with community members, in my opinion, when I'm representing myself here on this board, I really think that we have to make sure we're conveying it in a public setting such as the message is relayed to us. And that's not one that serves our own purposes or our own agendas, but one that the board and the community as a whole can listen to a truthful and complete information. So in our discussions, it was made very clear that both the borough and Park Authority are not opposed, nor would they reject the use of turf. When asked, it is their personal preference that they like grass. I like grass too. On Friday, we all chose to kind of focus on the windshield, right, Dwayne? The windshield approach as opposed to the rear view mirror, and just pushing forward and moving forward in a meaningful, productive way for the school district, for the borough, for the Park Authority, and ultimately for our taxpayers. As a side note, when we're talking about growth in our area, it was mentioned, and I kind of wrote this down because I thought it was important to know that as a note, when talking about growth, that there were 700 new water requests for construction in the area. What that all means, they would have to explain more because, that's as far as my detail goes on that point. There were a lot of ideas, though, that I can tell you with so much talent that was available in the room. I think we will all hopefully be able to invite others to participate in with that conversation as a committee, and welcoming, Dr. Moyer and Mr. August into that conversation with the borough as well. I really think it was just necessary for us to kind of clear the air and, start a fresh path forward and to kind of stop and leave the past in the past. So I do also want to acknowledge that this opportunity may not always be here for us as a school district. I think, no matter where we settle, if it's on, if we decide that the right move for the district is one field here at the school property, then I think we have to recognize that eventually the borough is going to do something with Veterans Stadium. And so that really may limit our district as a whole in being able to attain that property in the future. So I think that, we have to really move swiftly and comprehensively for a long-term strategy that, in my opinion, should include a hybrid approach. But again, that's going to be through all of those conversations that we can work toward in the future. That's all I have.
Thank you, Becky. Fred, do you have a safety security report?
Yes, we were not a really report because we met with one of the options for safe school safety, G-Force, and Dr. Moore is setting up another meeting with another one. Then after we get all three together and we'll go through the information, then we'll have a better report.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Student representatives. Lily, how about you go first?
Okay. The high school held a floor hockey tournament where the advanced team sports class went against the teachers, and the teachers won. The juniors and seniors were given the opportunity to participate in a virtual financial aid night where they discussed types of aid for secondary education. On the 21st, the school carried out a college visit to Princetown University for any students interested in participating. Visits to Kutztown University is also being planned for September 30th. On the 22nd, a military information night was held with Sergeant Sanders to discuss service academics, ROTC, and enlisting. This year's Special Olympics students will be participating at Dickinson College's Special Olympics on October 13th. Students are welcome to volunteer at the event. And Jazz Band is currently accepting auditions. I will now pass it to my fellow student representative, Aryan Gonkar. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be continuing this board report. The FFA is hosting a toy drive for a boy named Weston, a childhood cancer survivor. Weston hopes to donate all of the toys to Hershey's Children's Hospital. The sophomore class of 2025 will be fundraising by selling country meat sticks. The school's FFA team competed at the All-American Junior Dairy Management Contest, where they placed third among numerous statewide FFA teams. The ACE Mentor Program is to be held on Friday for all students interested in architecture, construction, and engineering. On Wednesday, the boys and girls cross-country team defeated 5 of the 6 teams they ran against at Sesquinita. And finally, the homecoming dance is coming up on October 8th at the high school, and with the theme, which is Western.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Aryan. Move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Buterball. A number of things here this evening. And while we've got the borough here, and just to complement Chief Scott's remarks, we have now in the way of safety and security, we now have a proposal from the borough. We now have a proposal from G4 Security Services, and we're looking to have a consultant to come in and talk to us about our final option, in my opinion, of possibly creating our own police force. So I just want the board to know and the general public to know this is not an issue that is dying. This is an issue that is out in the front, and the safety and security of our students and staff continues to be a very high priority. So also on that topic, I just want to thank publicly the borough and Chief Scott Miller for the strong police presence that we've had since the beginning of the school year for the past month. The presence in the morning and the afternoon is greatly appreciated, and I just want to say a big thank you to the borough and the commitment that we're seeing on Chief Miller and his team, and it's much appreciated. I'm pleased to announce that the Greyhound Foundation has awarded the district $14,000 to purchase, and I'm going to read word for word here a little bit so I don't miss anything, an 11-station keyboard lab for the high school. The lab, which would be installed in the existing music classroom 20, would be the first of its kind in the high school and will significantly expand the opportunities for the students to study piano and keyboard. Additionally, it will be a nice complement to the lab and music program at the middle school. The proposal allows for student stations and an instructor station, It is made by the same manufacturer as the middle school. Again, total cost of $14,000, so a very big thank you to the Greyhound Foundation. Board members, at your seat, you have a 3-page copy of a job description for a potential executive director position for the Greyhound Foundation. We are looking to put together a proposal where there would be a partnership with the foundation to get this off the ground. I believe the draft copy that you have in front of you is pretty comprehensive, and it's pretty close to, in my opinion anyway, pretty close to being a final document. And I would just ask you to carefully consider that and give us some direction on how we might want to move forward in that regard. Becky, I'm thinking you and your committee would be perfect for this, and I know we've already had some interactions in that regard. Also would like to, on behalf of Principal Luffy, that's going to go out for a news release, that we have announced today that Angela Kai and Noah Evelyn have been named to the commended students in the 2023 National Merit Scholarship Program. A letter of commendation from the school and National Merit Scholarship Corporation will be presented to the principal to these scholastically talented seniors. Students throughout the nation are being recognized for their exceptional academic promise. So a big congratulations to Noah and Angela. As I've shared with the board previously, we had a terrific year in the way of recruiting a terrific staff, in the way of professional and support staff. I am on a mission and continue to be on that mission to meet with every new member of our staff individually, just to make sure they're doing okay and doing a little checkup and progress with them. Unfortunately, by the time I get into the school, everybody needs a piece of me. It's been tough to get out there from time to time. So I'm still a work in progress, but everyone that I've met with thus far, I'm pleased to report, seems to be really being acclimated and is making a strong contribution in helping our school move forward. And then finally, board members, Lauren and I would like, after this meeting, just to get a few minutes of your time in executive session to talk a little bit about some of our special education classrooms and some student challenges that we have. So again, we promise, Lauren has said we can keep it to 7 to 10 minutes maximum. So if you would allow us a few minutes for an executive session afterwards, we'd appreciate that. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Moyer. We'll move on to the consent agenda. 4A is the approval of the minutes from September 12th and September 19th. 4B are the finance reports. 4C, personnel, professional staff. Administration recommends approval of the following resignation. Brandon Garcia, health and physical education teacher at James Byrd. Administration recommends approval of the following FMLA qualifying leave of absence requests. Crystal McCoy, second grade teacher at James Byrd, tentatively from January 3rd, 2023 and continuing through February 28th. Administration recommends approval of the following salary adjustments for the following professional staff members. Crystal McCoy, Master 60, Sarah Gerber, Masters 90, Teresa Harris Tibbetts, Masters 75, Renee Stewart, Masters 60, Kevin Weber, Masters 75. Administration recommends approval of the following new appointments. Hannah Hooper, long-term substitute first grade teacher at James Byrd. Samantha Letts, long-term substitute life skills support teacher at James Byrd. Kylie Miller, long-term substitute third grade teacher at James Byrd. Gabrielle Stein, long-term substitute language arts teacher at the middle school. And Alexis Mills, long-term substitute fourth grade teacher at the intermediate school. All of these positions are at a $283.70 per day per diem salary. Support staff, administration recommends approval of the following change of hours. Stacy Shank. She's a part-time classroom assistant at the middle school, working 5.7 hours per day, to part-time classroom assistant at the middle school at 4.75 hours per day. Administration recommends approval of the following transfer. Katie Roan, part-time classroom assistant at James Byrd, to full-time classroom assistant at James Byrd. Administration recommends approval of the following new appointments. Mallory Arnold, part-time kitchen helper at the intermediate school. Nancy Clendenning, part-time kitchen helper at James Byrd. Patience Caluso, part-time kitchen helper at the high school. Kristen Dittmar, part-time cashier helper at the high school. Corey Jumper, part-time classroom assistant at James Byrd. Supplemental staff, administration recommends approval of the following new appointments. Drake Renais, middle school assistant wrestling coach. Brian Christ, high school assistant wrestling co-coach. Jaden Forsyth, high school stage co-manager. Caitlin Kite, high school stage co-manager. Sharon Lawrence, high school assistant stage manager and AV coordinator. Suzanne Lloyd, high school musical teacher, production manager. Catherine Meredith, co-department chair, nursing. Teresa O'Neill, co-department chair, nursing. Troy Ramsey, high school assistant co-coach. Michael Valet, middle school academic competition advisor. Administration recommends approval of the following volunteer coaches. Teresa Beckenball, middle school field hockey. Matthew Carr, baseball. Administration recommends approval of the following position volunteers per the policy 916. 4D, the Rashini Employer Reporting Engagement Proposal. 4E, contract for the high school yearbook. 4F, Board of School Directors meeting schedule for 2023. 4G is a Act 57 resolution for the attached client alert for the Beard Legal Group amendments to the local tax collection law that become effective October 11th. Based on Act 57, taxing districts must adopt a resolution which requires tax collectors to waive additional charges if a new homeowner fails to receive their real estate tax notice and requests a waiver of the property tax penalty within the first year of them owning the property. And finally, 4H is the memorandum of understanding for Lego League in the elementary schools. Does any member of the board want to take any of the consent calendar separately? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Mrs. Eberly. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Goetz. Roll call.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yeah.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christy. We'll move on to the action agenda. Just for purposes of explanation for the public, if you're here for the first time, we have an action agenda and we have a discussion agenda. The action agenda are actually items that were on the previous discussion agenda and now move forward for a vote. After the action agenda, we'll get to the discussion agenda, and those items are meant for discussion purposes tonight and then would transfer to the action agenda at the next meeting. 5A is the agreement with News Story for Special Education Services. Is there a motion to approve 5A?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Suiters. Is there a second?
Fred Scott seconds.
Second by Mr. Scott. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christy. 5B is canopy and tent rentals. Administration is recommending retroactive approval for the canopy and tent rental from Leroy's Lawn Service for sports teams at Veterans Park. Cost is $5,485.50. Is there a motion to approve 5B?
Fred Scott, make a motion to approve.
Mr. Scott makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Suiters. Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christy. 5C is a tuition student request. Is there a motion to approve 5C? Hearing none, is there a motion to table 5C?
Motion to table 5C.
Mrs. Eberly motions to table 5C. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Suiters. Table motions are not up for debate. Roll call?
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christy. 5D is the Conceptual Design Services Agreement Amendment with EI Associates. This was revised. Administration is recommending that the board approve an amendment to the existing professional services agreement with EI Associates to create up to 3 conceptual designs related to programs at all educational buildings in the district and provide an update to the enrollment study as directed by the board. The amount is not to exceed the not to exceed amount of the amendment for this work is $47,500. Is there a motion to approve 5D?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Goetz. Is there a second?
Fred Scott seconds.
Second by Mr. Scott. Discussion?
When we say all buildings, that includes the elementary buildings as well.
It does. Matter of fact, before we vote, I'm going to call Damian up for a brief explanation.
Good evening, everyone. Damian Spar, Site Logic. So, in assisting the district with this motion, when we walked away a couple of weeks ago, we were kind of focused on middle school, high school, with a meeting that was to occur then the following Wednesday, or last Wednesday, I believe it was, at which time the board and the administration started to look at the ideas of looking at the primary schools. I think mostly the 2 elementary schools, but we wanted to leave it open to not only the 2 elementary schools in case there was a need for additional space there, but also the intermediate schools. So we simply recommended the use of language for all educational buildings for this motion. And we included the enrollment study update because that's important to go with it.
There's just a quick clarification question. So last week we had a facilities meeting as a whole, and we reviewed like a sort of most recent kind of concept. I don't know if concept is the word that we want to use, but a kind of, I don't know, sort of general mapping of a new strategy for how to deal with some needs at the high school and the middle school, whatever. It's my understanding then that like what we're approving, if we were to approve this motion, that doesn't necessarily lock us into those ideas that we saw, but we're going to sort of work off of those ideas and perhaps modify them slightly as we move forward. But like, we're not approving like that plan necessarily. We're just saying, please go ahead and refine the plan more.
Your understanding is correct. So
More.
that scenario that we talked about last time I was here could be one scenario, and it could include expansion of schools at the primary level. There could be other scenarios, and we've talked about different scenarios. So what this is allowing the district to do is proceed forward in a way that allows continued input from the board, the desired input from Mr. August as he comes on board, and kind of keeps that ball rolling, but doesn't limit us to just what we talked about last time, which were focused on high school and middle school. You understand that correctly.
Thank you.
I have one more question. Would you just touch on how you would plan or how you would envision your approach to the enrollment study? I know that typically, and we've looked at these enrollment studies before, they're typically a look back, and we believe from looking back that we're not growing, and yet today we know that something's different. We have perhaps 200 more students today than we did this time last year. We did mention that we were visiting with the folks at the borough, and as we talked about this concept of growth, we looked across the table. In fact, lately, everybody that I look across the table at, I see them shaking their head in the affirmative that everybody that I talk to believes that we are growing. Including, that's the impression I think we got. And I don't know if they want to say anything or whatever. Some of the folks from the borough are here, but they have some perspective on that. But what will your plan be to approach this growth or no growth and trying to quantify it as we look at the 20-year needs out of our building from an enrollment perspective?
Well, I invite Adam Kerr, who's a principal at EI, who's going to perform this work up here. I will tell you that the conversations that we've had not only were about what have you seen in growth, but what is it that you're seeing now and what is happening with what you're hearing from the borough and so forth. So I think that he'll be able to provide you with a more comprehensive answer.
Adam Kerr, EI Associates. So in terms of the enrollment update, we would be, one, having discussions with PDE to get any kind of additional enrollment from them. And to that point earlier, we would also be having conversations with borough, townships, et cetera, to understand those housing starts. You know, I heard something about 700 water requests earlier, so we know that that's coming up. What we understand is this year's enrollment, is that just a blip on the radar, or is that being is that sustained? So we'll look at it comprehensively. We'll attack it from multiple fronts to get our best understanding on what's that projection look like.
And by the way, some of those folks are in the room tonight. May be good to make connection there, but there are three council from the Borough Council here tonight with us.
Any other discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christie. 5G, Superintendent Contract. Motion to approve the contract for Mr. William August as the Superintendent of the Shippensburg Area School District at a salary of $158,000 for a 5-year term from on or before December 26, 2022 to June 30th, 2027. The superintendent shall sign and execute a formal agreement in compliance with the provisions of the Public School Code of 1949 as amended. Is there a motion to approve Bill August as superintendent and the contract?
Dwayne Burt, so moved.
Moved by Mr. Burt. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Mrs. Wolfinger. Discussion. And I would like to just briefly, I want to thank Dr. Goetz and the Personnel Committee for, really good work in getting a contract with Mr. August and getting this done in a really good manner. So thank you very much. Any other comments regarding the contract? Roll call.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
No.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried, 8 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. And for the members of the public who are here, would like to introduce you to the new superintendent of Shippensburg School District, Mr. Bill August. Hopefully you start before December 26th. Before we move on to the discussion agenda, I did have comments and I didn't even know where. Here they are. I would like to also introduce 2 community leaders who are present this evening and invite each of them to make a comment if they wish. And if not, I just want to thank each of them for attending this evening. The first one is Mr. Keith Swartz, who is the president of Shippensburg Borough Council. Okay, well, close, right? And I'd also like to introduce Shippensburg University President, Dr. Charles Patterson. Move on to the discussion agenda. 6A is the Memorandum of Understanding between the Shippensburg School District and the Shippensburg Area Education Association. This is to include language in Appendix B2, supplemental salaries, non-athletic under the yearbook category with Grace B. Lures to be added to this category with the compensation to be $657 this school year, $663 next, and $670 in 2024-2025. Does any members of the board have any questions regarding 6A this evening? Move on to 6B, request to form a woodworking club. The administration is recommending approval of the request submitted by Melinda Fowler, practical arts teacher, to form a woodworking club at the high school. Does any member of the board have any questions for the administration this evening?
No questions. It's just exciting to see it on there.
Thank you. 6C is the partnership with Franklin County Children and Youth Services. Does any member of the board have any questions for the administration this evening? Hearing none, if you have any questions regarding 6A, 6B, 6C that pop up in the next 2 weeks, please try and get them to the administration in advance, so the administration can be prepared with answers.
Mr. President, may I ask you a question? Why was 5E and 5E and D, well, 5E, why was 5E removed? You know? Reaction?
K and W.
Oh.
They're here tonight, aren't they?
They are here tonight. Well, one, I think that before it comes up for vote, I think that the board is asking K and W to take a look at the athletic facilities to see if what is being proposed in terms of the multi-purpose stadium is actually enough. Or do we need an additional practice field, potentially at Veterans Stadium or somewhere?
I thought that's what they were going to do tonight. I thought that's what we told them last time to do tonight. Is that right, gentlemen? Or am I missing something?
Can you hear him?
Jerry?
When we spoke 2 weeks ago, when I was here, we were focused on the high school site properly, not potentially a different site. So the way I look at it is, if we were setting aside a budgeted amount and looking at the programming discussions that were had here Wednesday, again, this is a change tonight from the discussion, I believe, that was held Wednesday, because I believe Wednesday there was a discussion about field use, et cetera. So the difference is that it's either design in one location or design in two. Design in two locations, and I'm speaking for Mr. Korowski a little bit here, but design in two locations you have to go through separate permitting, et cetera, for different locations. So that's why the change. And I think following discussion tonight, Mr. Kreitz will be able to talk to Mark and K&W and say, okay, this is what we want our proposal to look like. That can be back in front of you as soon as the board would like to see it.
When did it change? Did we as a board change? Did we change?
Say that again, Fred?
Did we change anything as a board?
What do you mean, did we change anything at the board?
Design. I thought design was there, and we was going to vote on two.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the board had a healthy discussion about whether one field is enough, and
Yeah.
the board has also had discussion of whether $8 million multi-purpose field is too much or what. So I think that we're asking them to take a look at that to make sure that we have enough fields to cover the athletic program and Title IX.
I think that maybe I can help you, Mr. President, in that the change is in one location, one site versus two. The design that it's going to take to do two sites with separate stormwater and separate zoning, et cetera, that's a different design proposal than the one that was brought to you some time ago before the meeting that was held on Wednesday night. And that's why that's going to be revised for next time.
So let me understand. The main field, the main premise is a stadium on the school property, correct?
That's what I understand, yes.
That hasn't changed to your
That has not changed.
So
to
the
my
second
understanding.
field is either down here or at the park, correct?
I think that the importance is that that it was, before it wasn't anywhere else, it was here.
Yes.
Now, if it's at the park, that's different.
But we never changed the location. From all I know, we voted for here. So there
Well-
should be only one plan for here.
I don't think we ever looked at a specific location or ever approved a specific location for the second field.
I understand that. I'm just trying to get the first field. Heck with the second. That's why I thought we were saying we're going to do the stadium here, and if we could build a second one where the soccer fields is, and if we couldn't build that, we just had to go with that one and make it a grass field as it is now. Did I miss anything, Levi?
Well, I think, personally, I think that's one of the problems, is that I think some of us are not going to put our support behind a plan until we have a comprehensive plan. I think the fact is, and the more we talk with folks, the more we realize we're playing a little bit kind of everywhere. We're playing a little bit at the Pizza Hut field, and we're playing some at the park, and we're playing some here, and we're playing some at the university. And so from that perspective, we need to develop a comprehensive plan about.
God. How many months have we gone through the plan, Mr. Burke? We've gone through every plan. And hold it, Jamie, can you ask me a question? Would you stand there, please? How much has it cost this school district to produce these plans? $500,000?
To date,
We're gonna get billed. We're gonna get billed for all this.
you're asking me what was the proposal amount?
How much is gonna cost us for all these plans? How much is school district gonna put forward? When you get
What we had for one site
yes.
was about $550,000. What you're going to have for two sites is going to be a little bit more than that because you're going to have zoning and stormwater in two different locations. So that's the neighborhood that you're talking about. Am I speaking out of school, Mr. Krowski?
Okay, so we only got $500,000 invested in this.
You don't have anything invested in it right now other than any studies that you've paid K&W to do before. This is a new proposal to design it in a location. And it is the modification of that thought that it's not just in one place, but it's in two, that causes us to go back and get a new proposal from K&W so that you can design in two locations as opposed to just one.
Fred, can I interject a comment?
Yes, please.
I don't know if this will help or not, but to me, I saw three issues when I saw this on the agenda. The first was a procedural issue, right? So I didn't know that this was coming. So the other pieces on the action agenda, I knew that those were coming, right? Because those have been on the discussion agenda in the past. This was not, this specific, like, approval of this plan was not on the discussion agenda. And that's like the procedure we're supposed to follow. You put something on the discussion agenda, it shows up next time on the action agenda. So that's the first issue. The second issue is that I was looking at the plan. All along we've been talking and sort of budgeting in this $8 million range, and we've been seeing that in proposals and stuff, and I guess that's just kind of a rough number or whatever. But the proposal that I was looking at here in the document, I mean, and I recognize that, you know, it's a little bit loose and there could be some changes, but it was a $10 million plan. I mean, you've got the document. It was right there. I mean, the PDF. And so that seemed like there was a disconnect, and you looked at the picture and stuff, and I don't know. You look at the picture, and the picture seemed outdated from what our most recent talks were for the field. So I would have definitely needed clarification. It looks like we're about to get that, but let me make one more point, which is great. I appreciate that. But the third thing is to, I mean, just kind of follow up. I'll sort of say in my words what Dwayne was saying. I don't know if it's one field or if it's two fields or whatever. What I want to see is a plan that, like, sort of makes sense for our outdoor facility usage. Right now, we're clearly using the park's facilities. And I don't think that we have a good plan for, I mean, I don't think anybody wants to completely divorce ourselves from the park and say we're not going to use those facilities anymore. So I think what we need to do first is figure out how or if we're going to use the facilities of the park, what that looks like in a discussion with the borough, which is part of what I think Keith was bringing up, is like, hey, we want to talk, we want to figure out what that's going to look like. Because if we still need the practice field at the Pizza Hut field, whatever we're calling that, if we still need those other fields, we need to have that conversation. Because if we just sort of go forward and say, hey, we're doing our own thing here at the high school, then the borough's going to say, okay, well, they don't need us. We're going to do our own planning. And we don't necessarily want that, because we need those fields, and we need to work with them to figure out what that looks like, even if we put, like, our sort of main, you know, flagship stadium here on the high school campus. So we've got to work that out before I'm willing to say, hey, K&W, go ahead with the design work and whatever. So
Are we still, is the plan for the stadium still at the high school, or that changed?
I mean, as far as I'm aware,
High school.
the board made a decision that it was going to be at the high school, and that hasn't changed.
Fred, the board has already approved the multipurpose stadium on district property, and the board has never rescinded that vote.
Okay, that's clarified. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate. So all I'm asking is, why can't the stadium part be done and we do the other part? We can't do two things at the same time? Either we got enough money for the one stadium on the school district, and if we have extra, we'll do the things down the park.
I mean, just from my perspective, I don't think it's going to take that much longer to sort of figure out what our needs are in our relationship with the borough and for the parks fields. We figure that out, then we can set K&W loose with whatever,
Gentlemen, did you make a design for the park?
There's no design proposal for the park right now, but.
Not right now, but
Right
you
now.
have made them for both the park and up here.
Not for renovation,
No.
which is what we're talking about.
Who?
We've done multiple sketch plans for different configurations, both at the park and at the high school. So they were concepts that were shared previously.
I don't think you guys did a concept for
Not for renovation.
just
Yes, you did.
a practice type facility there, though, correct? It was more of a,
Configuration.
okay, here's your multi-purpose stadium on district property, here's your multi-purpose stadium at Veterans Park.
There were a couple of different options. Not one of them was just one field.
Okay.
It was, okay, if we had to do other stuff, would have included a field, but not one by itself.
Okay.
If I could ask, so I'm sure we're understanding what the approach is. We've got a proposal for the high school. Doesn't seem like that may change. We're talking about a facility potentially at the park, which sounds like it would be driven out of like a programming study that essentially I would think talks with the athletic director and administration to say what sports are playing and practicing where, so we can ensure through scheduling that we've got a place for all of those locations to happen, appropriately, not practicing at 10 o'clock at night, preferably. So that's the first step in my mind, is kind of a little half step back that says, okay, and I apologize, I was able to attend that meeting last Wednesday or whenever that was, but sounds like there was good information shared there about schedule. Okay, we can take that information back. Quite honestly, it's something we typically do kind of on a parallel path with the other items, but I get it. If we want to look at that first, then I would assume we would come back to the board to say, okay, based on that little kind of comprehensive athletic facilities, district-wide athletic facilities study, it seems like, hey, you're good with one field at the high school and that should cover your needs, and here's kind of the schedule and how that rolls out. Or, now, there may be a reason to look at a second field, and it would seem like that second field seems to be consideration at Memorial Park. A question I'll ultimately have is it still an $8 million budget?
No.
Because if that's the case, then we've got to remove some stuff from the high school project. You can't get two fields. I mean, right now, the budget, I'm not sure, to be honest, where the $10 million number came from, because our proposal includes a specific, actually fairly detailed cost estimate for this level of conceptual plan that's at $8 million. Doesn't contemplate anything. In fact, that's what our fee's based on. So that doesn't contemplate anything Memorial, but ultimately that's a question we'll need to know is what's the target budget for all of whatever athletic improvements there may be, and are we splitting that between high school and Memorial Park? So what I'm hearing we'll come back with is a proposal probably in three pieces. The first one saying we're going to do this fairly quickly, schedule and field analysis for sports, for games and practices to say, will one field do it or not? Then the proposal would say, if we need two, here's what that looks like. If we only need one and it's at the high school, that's the proposal that you already have in front of you. Does that seem like?
You're right. I totally misspoke on the $10 million. I apologize for that.
Totally no worries.
It does come in just under $8 million. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
All good. We've had a bunch of these
I think
estimates.
with that scheduling piece, what some of us are hoping to see is that would also include any potential future sports that we don't currently have.
Yes.
So lacrosse,
Absolutely.
potentially tennis, but then also our marching band students that also use those facilities as well.
Yes.
That weren't on that schedule.
Yes. And to be honest, I mean, we can get into if you want, but like ultimately there's conversation about what are the community uses outside of, district sports and other events. So we try to get that. That's a typical part of our program exercise, similar to what you would do with Mr. Kerr and EI talking about the building. We do a similar programming effort for the athletic spaces.
So you'll have this, what, next week?
Yes.
We hope.
We'll have the proposals next week.
Well, I mean,
We should have.
I feel like you need us to still do some work if we're going to, if I'm understanding correctly, that we want to have a conversation with the borough and figure out like how that matches in with our master plan. That's kind of our job, not necessarily your job, unless you are proposing this sort of parallel process, which we can do those things at the same time.
Dr. Goetz, I will tell you, getting this a little bit out of order was on me because I provided that information to the board, I think maybe just a little bit too early. So that first point that you brought up, I think, is mine. Now, the good news is we're having a discussion here so that we can do that going forward. And in my desire to assist the process, it might make some sense for us to say to K&W, provide us this small part of the proposal that says, here, I'm going to help you figure out where this goes. And then the rest of the proposal can be the proposal as it stood here, if it's all on this property, or a proposal if it's on two different properties. That way, you can have the proposals to do the work. In whatever time you'd like as a board, you can say, yes, you may go on this part that does the study, and we can do these things that we're talking about doing with K&W's collaboration. Then the board can say, okay, now go and either do it in two places or do it in one place, but you already have the information and the design proposals to do that. And that may be an easy way to do it.
Yeah, that's possible. I guess just the piece here is that, like, I think we need designs that include the park, but we can't have you designing something that the borough and the Parks Authority isn't amenable to, right? So there has to be a conversation there to make sure that they're all on board with whatever.
Unequivocally.
From your
I think we've had conversations, like, they're a stakeholder. Even if we weren't using the park, we would be talking to the borough as a stakeholder. So to me, as part of the programming discussion, just like we're talking to the district about all the district's needs in sports and practices and events and uses, certainly if we're talking about Memorial, we need to have that same discussion. We are happy to do it. That to us is part of our engagement. I mean, that's what we bring stakeholders together to get the feedback. Then we bring forward to the board. And if you want to, we have worked with a steering committee before, and we did this in Camp Hill, which was a borough and the school district doing this on a $5 million, $6 million park athletic facility. They had members from both as part of a committee that were then part of the process going forward so they could hear all the discussion, make sure this was happening and it wasn't this. So the long answer to your short question is we are happy to coordinate that directly with borough personnel and incorporate that and weave that into the discussion we ultimately share with the board.
I'm still trying to fathom why the stadium's going to be at the high school. We made that decision. Why can't we start with that? Why can't we then move on to whatever you want to do next? Mark will work with the park down there, doing everything. But the stadium, we do know that we're going to build a stadium here, I think. Why can't we start that? Because as I said before, in months gone, interest rates went up last Wednesday. That's taking money away from our students while we're still waiting to make a decision. Like I said before, we lost $6 million for the school district just on a bond. Somebody said it's 7.2 now, or we lost millions on a bond, just dead money. We could have built a stadium with most of that. We could have built a cafeteria with most of that. We've gone through the circus over and over and over. And if you don't want to build a stadium, don't build it. But don't keep going through this rigmarole every month. I just want an answer. Just do the stadium at the park, at the school district, or don't do it. Every month we come here. Now, why are these gentlemen here tonight? Why are you here?
We understood this item was going to be on the agenda, at least for discussion.
So did I.
So
what I got out of this conversation so far is that we removed this from the agenda because we had an issue about where we were going to practice. That's essentially a lot of what I got.
Well, it was removed from the agenda because it wasn't on the discussion agenda.
Neither was, we
prior.
also just voted to approve the high school plan going forward, or the entire academic stuff going forward, but we're not doing this. It's the same thing. I mean, I understand that argument, but if that's the case, then we really shouldn't have voted on that either.
Well, that's not true. That's not true.
Yeah, that was on their presentation. I can show you the screenshots of it, that tonight was the date for it to be on the agenda to.
For E&I,
So
correct.
I certainly remember Damien asking us 2 weeks ago here to get us to a vote on everything.
Well, and the deadline was
on-
10/10. Like, looking through the slides, the deadline was 10/10.
Well, let me say this, and I think this certainly isn't, just about practice. I think the reality is that some of us, are still scratching our heads a little bit over the fact that we on one hand talk about one field, and yet we're playing and practicing just about everywhere. We're currently using the Pizza Hut field. We're currently using the Memorial Park Veterans Stadium field. We're currently doing some things with the university in addition to the things we're doing here on our own property. And somehow we think that one field is gonna satisfy that. So in my opinion, again, I'll look at supporting a project when we have a comprehensive project to discuss, but we need to understand how the university is going to fit, how the university could and how the university is going to fit into our future plans, and communicate that and wrap that into the comprehensive plan along with the borough, along with the things that we may do here on our own property. And all of that needs to be done simultaneously with the needs for the school district, because we have a limited amount of borrowing capacity, and it's just incumbent upon us to develop a comprehensive plan to understand exactly what the needs are and move forward. And as soon as we've moved forward with the things we could move forward with, and rather than, in my opinion, rather than getting caught up on what it's going to take to build a consensus among this board and to be able to move forward, why don't we focus on that? Why don't we focus on what it takes to build a comprehensive plan, and then you can get consensus on this board and you'll be able to move forward. Now, I do want to go back one more time, because I think it would be inappropriate to when we talk about the comments about that we've lost $6 million and whatever, they're not helpful at all. And what I really believe they do is they contend to give the public some sort of incorrect or inappropriate perspective about what's going on here that isn't helpful, and it doesn't build anything toward the future. It really is just wrong. The fact is that we would have had to have borrowed this money and built this project and so forth, but prior to 6 months ago, which means the planning phase would have had to have been 1 year and 2 years out prior to that, which really means most of us weren't even seated at the time that work would have needed to have been done. So what you're really it's equivalent to saying, that had the people that were here, let's say 3 years ago, done this or put all the plans together such that, 2 years ago this could have, but we're still working on the plans. So while we certainly are in a period of rising interest rates, and we certainly want to move as quickly as we can, as soon as we develop a comprehensive plan, to say those things it's really damaging. It's damaging in the public. It's damaging to the school district. It isn't helpful at all. It isn't moving the ball forward. And the fact is that we're going to address our projects at the place and time we get dropped into history, because it's my perspective, and we can ask Mrs. Lentz to give us a little primer on where we've been in the past. But it's my belief that every project we ever did was done at points in time of higher interest rates even than we are now. And that's not an excuse to delay or whatever. It is a reason to develop a comprehensive plan. But I believe that we built an intermediate school. We bought land and built an intermediate school at interest rates higher than we have now. And I believe that we renovated elementary schools at interest rates higher than now. And I believe we renovated the Career and Tech Center, our part of it at interest. And I believe we built an arts wing onto this high school at interest rates higher than they are now. And as time moved forward and interest rates dropped and the bonds became callable and we had an opportunity to refinance that debt at lower interest rates, we did so, and we'll do that again. But we're going to address the needs that we have in a comprehensive way. We're going to deal with these needs at the time and place that we're dropped into history when we're ready, and that's the reality of it. So thank you.
I'm not worried about history. I'm living here for today. We got $8 million. That's my understanding. We can go budget at $8 million. Every day, every month, every week detracts from that. So that means if it keeps up, we may not have enough money to build a stadium.
Well, which is the reason that I'd recommend that we work as hard as we can on developing a comprehensive plan to lay out where the borough fits in this and where the university fits in this, understanding the enrollment needs today and going forward so that we can develop a comprehensive plan. Because I don't believe that you have the votes to move forward in the situation that we currently have until we develop a comprehensive plan to address all the needs of this school district and understand how the pieces fit together. And then I think we'll have consensus to move forward.
Damien, how long do you anticipate it to take to have the stakeholder meetings and conceptual designs back to this board?
You're talking about for the fields?
Correct. You like that question?
Are we talking about this programming effort? We're not talking about design. We're talking about the programming effort that looks at all the uses and says, here's where we're going to put them based on all the fields that are in play, or basically the first step. I think that's what you're asking, is us talking to all the stakeholders, school district, borough, whoever the other entities are, pulling that together, then developing like a master plan that says, here's your Pizza Hut field, here's your Memorial Stadium field, here's the high school campus, here's what sports are played on each one and practiced on each one. Question mark. Is that what we're asking, the first piece?
No.
Okay.
That's not what I'm asking at all.
Okay.
What I'm asking is, when do you believe that, okay, we have the $8 million multi-purpose design. If it comes out that we do need a practice field at Veterans Stadium, and the borough wants to work with us on that, how long is it going to be before you come to this board with a concept design for that and cost?
You do it in like 2 weeks. It won't.
All right, then do it in 2 weeks.
Concept.
What this call?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So the same level that's been shared so far. So, and again, just want to make sure you weren't asking from a schedule standpoint, like the actual design and permitting component.
No.
Right? That's a 10, 12-month period to get through design, permitting, go to bid, start construction. So from the word go to do the work for design and permitting to get your field built is in that 10 to 12, probably closer to 10 months, plus another 5 or 6 for construction.
No.
So whenever it's awarded, and if that moves forward for any field, you're talking 16 months until fields are ready for use at a minimum.
No, mine was more of if there is going to be a second field and it's going to be at Veterans Stadium, what is the cost of that?
Construction cost.
What you gave us an $8 million price for the multi-purpose stadium.
A turf field completely by itself, looking over the thumb, completely swag, it's about $1 million. But that doesn't include if you're going to do bleachers, if you're going to do other stuff. So there's, that kind of programming conversation. Again, those can all happen parallel to the other part of the discussion. But ultimately, I guess we need to have a sense of, is there a budget we're trying to target? And if it's not a budget, then we need to know what the scope is. And I think that's kind of where we've run into some challenges before, is ultimately it became, we have $8 million to spend. Perfect. Then we know what we're working against. If that's still the target, then we say, okay, well, now we have to find a balance. If there's going to be a field somewhere else, What do we do at the high school versus, in conjunction with at another location?
Actually, I'd like to add that I think that concept, that approach is one of the things that bother some of us. It's as if we have $8 million to spend and let's back into what that looks like. I think some of us would really like to start on the other end of this and determine really what all the needs are and how those needs can be addressed.
We were given the $8 million budget number, which is why we worked towards it. We didn't establish that number.
That's exact, and right, I'm sure of that, and that's exactly what it always looked like too. It always looked like we've got $8 million to spend, and let's find a way to let's see what that'll buy us, or let's find a way to use it. I do want to go back and talk about, we keep calling this a practice field perhaps at Memorial Park, and do we need it or whatever, but it'd be interesting to answer the question, what are we doing on the Pizza Hut field right now? Are we only practicing, or are we having some competition there as well? And what are we doing at Veterans Stadium Memorial Park? Are we only practicing? I don't think so. I think we've got competitions going on there, and I think it's multiple competitions. And what are we doing here? And what are we doing at the university? Sure. And all that needs to be brought into focus to be able to answer this question in a comprehensive manner. Not how much money is left over or whatever. I understand that's an approach, but what we really need from top to bottom is to understand what all the needs are and develop a prioritized approach to address those needs, and then we'll get the money.
That's fine. That's the direction we need.
How'd you come up with $8 million? Why you did all that figuring and all that other kind of stuff? You came with $8 million, correct?
I don't recall.
No. I mean, Jeremy.
I'll answer that question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many times I've been in front of this board having this discussion or hearing it. And that's okay because it's thoughtful. However, we have time and time again been around this number. Now, when we have to make decisions, we either say we're going to define a benefit or we're going to define a contribution. But we're having trouble defining a benefit. So we defined a contribution and said over and over, $8 million may not be the number, but it's a place to start a discussion. And that's where $8 million came from, because the scope or the benefit could not be well defined. And so we looked at that number that we kept circling around through all those discussions and said, this is a placeholder until the board refines where its decision is.
So I apologize, but I remember that a little bit differently, and I could be totally wrong because I've been wrong before, but I remember that we had a discussion about scope, and there was some time ago that K&W came to us with a design, and it hit $8 million, and I think a lot of us were really surprised by that price tag, but I think, Damien, if I remember correctly, it's kind of like SiteLogic took that sort of proposal by K&W and said, okay, well, we better sort of reserve $8 million. And so then in the subsequent presentations, I always saw that sort of $8 million placeholder there. But I don't remember us ever having a discussion or any kind of consensus around that number. In fact, I think that those who were sort of anxious to get going were trying to build consensus around a $6 million number. So I mean, at least speaking for myself, I have always been pushing back against the $8 million and saying there's no way we can pull that off. $8 million is just way too much.
I'd like to agree with you and say I have heard that pushback. I have seen numbers greater than $8 million. I think that what you're saying is accurate, and the way I depicted it may have just been my view of it, but I can tell you, because of what the scope was and what we were looking at, like I said, I had a number that in order to have other discussions that we needed to work through. So while I would agree with you, the board never said, here's your number.
Yeah.
For the purposes of planning, rather than pinning us down to $6 million, I just earmarked 8 and said, this is the placeholder for now. So I think the way you've portrayed that is accurate too, Dr. Coates.
So I don't know how the rest of the board is feeling, but I mean, I still want to say to K&W, even if we were just going with kind of the picture that I saw on the earlier version of the agenda, like, man, it's 8 million. I don't know if we can I mean, I just don't see how we can afford that. Like, I mean, and I don't know what pieces have to come off or what sort of compromises need to be made, but that's just a really big price tag. And I recognize that, the climate's changing and, what may have been had for 6 million is going to be more now or whatever, but like, it's still like, that's just a really big number.
I personally think part of it is that we as a board need to set a budget. Like, we need to do our work and figure out what that price tag looks like to maximize, the comprehensive plan, like Dwayne is saying. We need to figure out what all of our needs are and where we're going to put those needs and then put a price tag on it. I feel like we've done it backwards. We've put a price tag out and then we're trying to match our needs to the price tag versus taking a look at what the needs are and building from there. Me personally, I think last week with us having the facilities meeting was a great thing. I think there was a lot of conversation had in a couple, 2.5 hour period of time that has not been a part of our regular school board meeting. I feel like we talk about it for, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, so no decisions are ever made. I want to get to the point where we can make a decision, but I think it's going to be through more of those 2.5 hour conversations and us coming to some kind of consensus as far as the budget goes for these poor men to then design around to meet all the needs of the people. I mean, we keep going in a circle. Nothing's ever gonna change if we keep going in a circle. So me personally, I think we need to have another special meeting because we made great progress last week.
So let me add, I don't disagree about the idea of setting a budget. In fact, Mr. Scott made a proposal just like that on ways to allocate so much money from a bond, X amount of money from fund balance, some point since I've been on the school board, and that vote lost. So we have proposed that before, and it lost. I think the vote was 6-3 or 5-3. I don't remember. We may have had an open seat at that time. $8 million. I mean, I've said the whole time too. Like, so it's a little much for my taste. But there's things that we've talked about doing, here or there. But I'm looking at a drawing here that I got an email about on April 28th that showed a preliminary cost estimate of $4.794 million. Of course, that didn't include bathrooms or concessions, but there was less than $5 million. We could have had that, and we still don't have that. Of course, you add that stuff, I don't know. That's, of course, as interest rates rose and everything, and the cost of stuff goes up, but super frustrating. Because, and again, we just got surveys. There was a survey done, and I'm not even sure who took the surveys, but 62% or 61 point something % of people.
It was the kids in the high school.
Students.
Kids in high school and staff, I think. And they said they preferred. Well, there was staff on there too. Yeah, most definitely. And they 62% of people said they preferred it to be right here on school grounds, and they seemed like that. Reading the responses in the email I got from Mr. Stevens, a lot of those people seemed like they were excited and ready to go as a student body. And again, as their teachers. And to go back to the practice schedule thing, I don't know, I mean, I thought Mrs. Fannis gave us a great presentation last Wednesday breaking down the timelines of when practices would be and all those things. I thought that was good. That wasn't the first time that I had seen that because I had went out and asked for that information before. Yeah, and I know one thing that comes up commonly, we say about one practice field, not have enough time, and kids being here till 8:45 at night for practice. I totally understand that, but we also have had one gymnasium forever that only has one functioning gym, and as a basketball coach in the district, I had practice here till 8:45 all the time, and our swimmers do, and just a wrestling team comes in and out. We've had kids practice here past, go home and come back, because I know that's been something that's been said. If we don't want kids to have to go home and come back, that happens everywhere. That's not just here. That's the reality of it. Unless you're sitting at a district that's got a $400 million budget and has 5 fields, you're going to have kids come home and come back. That's, I wish it wasn't that way. As a coach, I wish I wouldn't have had to do that, but that was a part of the agreement. As well as, and Ms. Fannis talked about this as well, this isn't like 1970 where like all of our coaches are teachers within the district. That's another factor in terms of the practice times. It's not like teacher gets off school, goes and has practice. Like this is not what it is. I never worked for as a teacher in the school district, but when I got done, I practiced early because many of the other people in my schedule, I allowed it. A lot of other coaches in the district couldn't be here at 2:45, so I was. I would be willing to bet if you looked around right now that probably half or more of our varsity coaches aren't employees of our school district on a full-time basis. So if we really nitpick at everything about scheduling, we're going to find even more problems that we can never get solutions to. I think it's been known for a while where I stand on this. I'm ready to go. I really want this for our kids. And all the teachers and the administrators that I talk to, they're just everybody's so ready to go on this, and it's been going on forever. And so it was frustrating to me to see this removed from the agenda tonight, and I would love to see it on the agenda as soon as humanly possible so we could vote and get this thing going, because that's just where I stand. Thanks.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'll make a couple. And really there are several, I guess. Well, one of the things that we talked about with the university, just so it's really clear, is we talked about how grateful we are for the long-term relationship we have with the what began as a Roland Lab School and is now the Grace B. Lure School, and all the benefits that come from that, and all the possible future possibilities that exist for us to partner with and work with the university, which in a mutually beneficial way. One of the things that we talked about most recently was the possibility of meeting the short-term needs, in kind of a bridge way while we're building whatever it is, and so forth. But tied close and to try to get started with as early as even possibly this year with something, but as early as next year in that bridge situation. But we have to be able to see that just behind that, if it could work and so forth, just behind that really all the money in this thing we're talking about relates to football, because that's where all the attendance is, which is what drives the seats, which is what drives the parking, which is what drives the perhaps the lights, and it's what drives the concession stands and the restrooms and so forth, which is where all the money is. That's how you get to $8 million. And just what's just beyond the short term is, would there be any way in the world, since the community by way of the university already has the large venue field, is there any way that we could avoid building it at all? If we could find the way to make that the Shippensburg school district home field on a long-term basis, and then we could take that $8 million that we avoided and divert part of it into smaller venue competition, both here at the high school to get that, and at Veterans Stadium Memorial Park as a memoriam to the veterans and to the community, and to meet all the needs. And then we'd still have several $1 million left over that we could put into these needs for elementary and really to address this population growth that sort of looks real to us, although remains to be seen. I just want to say that, because that perhaps hasn't ever been said out in public, but there it is. Now, is that a long shot? Yeah, of course it's a long shot, but think about it. If we're struggling to meet all the rest of the needs, and then there's smaller details, but certainly one of the stakeholders are the students here, but I'm not sure about the merits of, and I'm not sure about the wisdom of putting together this recent survey that evidently went to students, asking them where they would prefer to build it. I'm not sure what we thought they were going to say, and in reality, I think that all the stakeholders, and including the students, would be smart enough to know if we read them in, as a part of that survey, if we read them into the complexity of all the rest of this we're trying to do, is to figure out what all the needs are and to balance that against raising taxes and against borrowings and so forth, and debt service, and how that applies to our budget. It's a complicated thing. It's not quite as simple as where do you want to put it. I mean, I already know that if I were going to build a swimming pool, I'd rather build it in my backyard instead of in Keith Swartz's backyard. I mean, I think it's pretty self-evident. Now, I'd also like to talk about, because it was mentioned, And if you're wondering why the $6.5 million deal failed twice, I'd like to just comment on why it failed twice. First of all, we're sitting here with a drawing that says the multipurpose stadium on our property costs $8 million. So we didn't have a $6.5 million drawing. And so it didn't make sense from the beginning. And then we said that it was going to be funded by $3.25 million out of fund balance, which we already know that the amount of money we have in fund balance is the amount of money percentage-wise that is recommended to keep our borrowing capacity and credit rating up. So there was no reality in spending that money out of fund balance. And then the last piece is that the last a la carte kind of discussion we had about the $8 million stadium here showed that these amenities were about $500,000 apiece, which means that the difference between the $8 million stadium and the $6.5 million stadium that the funding didn't make sense for in the first place would have been one without lights, without restrooms, and without concession stands. Is that about right?
No. This is a conceptual plan discussion that's using high-level cost estimating from drawings that haven't even begun to be designed. If I could continue, please, since you asked the question. So there is extensive conversation that happens throughout the process where we talk about how to budget, what are the priorities for the district. If we want to step back and review the priorities district-wide, fine, we can certainly do that. We're happy to do it and come forward with this list that says, here's what we think based on the feedback we've gotten. But then it's like any project. Again, if you're not going to establish a budget, then we've got to go the other way and say, here's all the things, here's the list. I think Damien referred to it as the benefit, as the district ultimately then needs to say, here's the ones we want, or here's the ones we can afford. So I could give you 17 different options that's anywhere from $750,000 to $16 million. But until we have some sense of what the priorities are or what the target budget is, that number can move.
We just had principals last week tell us about the problem they have. That didn't come up at all today.
What's that?
The size and space they need in the schools right now, in the elementary schools.
I think that did come up. I think that Dwayne said when we voted that was looking
Part
at
of the
elementary
EI
schools.
motion.
The EI.
The one thing I am going to say is I'm going to put the board on notice that this athletic issue was on the discussion agenda tonight. And it was removed, but it was on the discussion agenda. So at any point when they come back with the conceptual, whatever you're coming back with, I guess we disagree on terms, but it will be on the action agenda. We're not going to bounce this discussion and action agenda all the time. Quite frankly, we talk about the athletic stadium and discuss the athletic stadium at every single meeting. So I look forward to the quick design and analysis of whether we need two fields or not. I'm still questioning whether we need to. And you showed us a lot of different districts around that don't have to, and they make it work. So I'm not even sure we have to, but I'm interested to find out if we do.
And I know the Title IX question came up before. Title IX is not an issue unless you dedicate a particular field to a particular use, namely field hockey. Then all of a sudden now you've got to find ways for parity. But if the field is a multi-sport, Title IX is not an issue.
Correct.
Oh, one additional question for Damien Spar. So I found the short answer of no to be interesting because I do recall all the details of a previous discussion where we went into the a la carte costs of all the components. And you're sitting there with a smile on your face and shaking your head because you know what I'm talking about. Can you remind us of what the a la carte costs were for the lights? We'll take it piece by piece, or do you want to help out? Because I'm quite sure, and they weren't this. I think the lights were $800,000, and but I just rounded them off in my mind to $500,000 a piece, and so a $6.5 million stadium would likely be. That's just the discussions that we had, correct?
I would generally agree with that.
Yeah.
The way I was thinking about it, and I want to stay in generality if I could, please.
Sure.
Is that we had stadium improvements and they amounted to some amount. But in many times, as we were talking up here, as KNW was talking, they were talking about construction costs. That didn't include the soft cost, which we know is over $500,000. And then you had different amenities. Doesn't matter what they are. And that's how that number of 8 million, that was a placeholder that we've had discussed for a while. Not that you were ever going to necessarily do $8 million of work, but at least we had a placeholder. And I think, Mr. Burt, the general math you were using is kind of the general math that I recall. And that's why when you start to go between the 6 and the 8 and say, what am I going to build? I say, well, if I put 6 in there for you, now we're hamstringing ourselves further from that discussion of what do we really need. So I was cautious with that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you. Thank you very much for your attendance, and look forward to your quick coming back to us. Move on to citizen comments for non-agenda items. This comment period is for any other items that you wish to address the board. And we do have 2 that have signed up. So first, Mr. John Erb.
Thank you, Mark. As Mark mentioned, my name is John Herb. Came tonight to talk briefly about the proposed residential development that is been conceptualized, at least. I'm not exactly sure where it stands, that is adjacent to the intermediate school, that apparently there's been discussion about from the developer or the township. Exactly how these things all originated, I'm not sure of, but to run a road around in the neighborhood that would connect up across district property with Holler Avenue. The concern, this whole project was really not brought to my attention until just a couple of weeks ago, and perhaps it was alarmist, but the concern that was raised to me that caused me to concern and be concerned and want to jump into this a little bit was that there was a plan for a member of the Southampton Cumberland County Township Supervisors to be here to talk about the project, and was led to believe that it might even have resulted in there being a vote on it 2 weeks ago at your meeting. He never showed. I don't know whether to take that as an indication of it really being in a very early conceptual stage, or is maybe dead in the water already. I don't know. There's not enough that I've had time to investigate on, but the little bit that I have looked into led me to believe that what was being sold to the board was that there would be a connector road that would allow for secondary egress from the intermediate school in the case of an emergency. And while that might be a good idea, the school has been there for 10 years. As I elaborated on in the email that I sent to each of you just a few days ago, I'm not sure how necessary that is. It struck me as a bit of a red herring kind of perk that they were trying to lay out to urge the board to go along with this project. But it strikes me in thinking it all through that the potential liability concerns of allowing the additional traffic across district property down the connector to Holler Avenue right in front of the intermediate school, not more than 20, 30 feet away from a playground area that isn't completely fenced in around the school, opens the board up to potential liability issues that outweigh the secondary means of egress issue, coupled with the fact that there certainly would be a way to plan this to have a road paved or gravel with a gate across that would allow the secondary egress and maybe add a walking path. I'm not sure why the developers were really so concerned about making this connector, other than maybe make it convenient for parents of kids attending either one of those schools, easy access. But it presents a whole host of different problems for the board, for the district, for the borough, and a walking path could be put in for kids in that new neighborhood that's going to be built to be able to get to the intermediate school or James Byrd without them having to be bussed around in a circle. All those things could be dealt with without the board incurring the potential liability of opening it up to through traffic, not only from the new residential neighborhood, but traffic that might look for a short cut into the middle of town from Airport Road down to Holler, which leads to Orange. That's a mess. Orange Street as a secondary route in the borough east-west is a nightmare. I live 3 doors up from that intersection. There's accidents there all the time. People blown through stop signs. There would need to be a red light put in there, I'm sure, if that development happened. But I wanted to urge the board to proceed with caution if that comes up again. Maybe it is dead in the water, and be concerned about it. One of the things I thought of just today is I remember there being constructed, because I walk up that way with my pups all the time. There's a Frisbee 9-hole golf course outside that school and the grounds around it. One of the holes for that is across the road, which when the buses aren't traveling,
Your 3 minutes is up.
is not an issue. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Appreciate it, John.
Okay.
Avery.
Hi, I have one quick thing. I've traveled around many districts for a bunch of different activities, and everywhere I go, their stadiums and facilities are nicer than here. And I would just like to urge us to stop dragging our feet and get to it, because we deserve better. Like, everywhere I go, nice stadium, and no matter what the district is, they found a way to make it work. And we need to stop dragging our feet and figure out how to get it done.
Thank you, Avery.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Tim, state your name and address for the record.
Tim Hess, 60 Diller Drive, Shippensburg. One thing I didn't get clarification, I don't know if you guys can answer this or not, but at the complaint of the meeting for the last meeting I was here 2 weeks ago was I don't know what the word is, pervious. This field down here, we were worried about putting in a practice field there. And we were talking about the only way to find that out was to go to the zoning board or zoning person. Has there been did anybody go do that to find out if artificial turf, if put in on school district, would be considered non-pervious? I don't know if that was the school board or the K&W that was going to do that, or Site Logic. But if that was the holdup for this, first of all, I agree with you, Mark. I don't know if we need a second field. I think our athletic director, Mrs. Fain, has presented everybody here with a schedule, including band, that it would all fit. There's a big difference between turf and grass. If it rains, everything's wiped out. With turf, you can have a lot more activities going on. But the point is, if the second field can be put in where the soccer and field hockey field currently are, the Greyhound Foundation Athletic Committee is here, and we can raise money. I heard $1 million to put it in with no bleachers and no lights, just the field. We can get $1 million. Nothing's 100% guaranteed, but we got businesses right across the road here that are more than willing to help us out if things are put in on school district property. If we can find, if it's non-pervious, I think that was the only holdup as of the last meeting, unless something's changed. If I guess it's non-pervious, then we can put a second field in. You won't have to put in additional parking for the second field. But I agree. I don't know if we actually even need a first field, because the schedule works out. You can do all the fields. You can do all the practices. But if the school district wants a second field, if we need more practices, and it's on school property. The Greyhound Foundation Athletic Committee is here, and $1 million is not that big a deal. We can get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Any other comments?
There's a jump.
Mike, if you could state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, hi, Mike Pimentel. I'm at 600 Brenton Street here in Ship. And I first want to say thanks. Thank you, school board members, for serving our community on the school board. And I think y'all can be proud of how you're handling yourselves, dealing with contentious issue. That's a challenge, and those close to you can be proud of what you're doing. So many thanks. I do want to say I'm going to present myself to you in two ways. First, as citizen living at 600 Brenton Street, which is the Holler Heights neighborhood. And I just moved there in June. And I moved there because it's a really nice neighborhood. It's been established. It's been a quiet, peaceful place, a leafy green neighborhood where people walk the sidewalks. They're connected to the community by those sidewalks. And it's always had a reputation as a quiet place. And we know many people who live there. I no sooner move in there than I hear that there's this potential that Holler Heights, or at least Holler Avenue, is going to be connected with an interconnect across school ground over to Airport Avenue. And I could just envision the traffic coming down Orange Street, turning up Holler, blasting by the schools, across the open field, onto Airport Road to go where? To go to Walmart, to go to the casino when it's open, to go to Rutter's, to go to Planet Fitness, etc. I don't think this is going to be beneficial to that neighborhood, which has been there for 80 years. I found it interesting that a survey was done to students and staff here about where they would like to have a practice field or a field for a stadium. I found it interesting that has been no survey of our neighborhood to ask us how this would impact our lives, citizens who pay the taxes that run the schools. So that's one way I like to present myself. The second is I wear a few hats. So I have in the past served on Shippensburg Borough Council. Served 2 terms, and it was my pleasure and honor to serve as president of that council. Now, I will grant you that was some time ago, perhaps before the streets were paved. But nevertheless, I remember learning some things there. And now I serve as the chairperson of the Shippensburg Municipal Authority. And we own and operate the water system. And it is true that we are being inundated with requests for service. Now, not all of that service is homes where you might have families with children. Some of them are larger entities, businesses, etc. But there is a lot of growth coming to our community. What I would like to propose is that I think we need to move into a regional mindset about development. Where we put roads, for instance, is critically important to what our community is going to look like and feel like to future members who live here. Putting the roads in the wrong places can be destructive. Putting them in the right places can be, in fact, building and very healthy. So there are developments that are being proposed that are not yet quite ready to be talked about in public, but I think we need to have the school district, we need to have the townships, we need to have the borough and the borough authority all sit together and talk about where this development is going and how do we service them both with roadways as well as other services. So I thank you again for the service you provide to the community, and I wish you all well.
Thank you, Michael. Any other comments? Move on. Any board comments? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Well, it's already been said, but I'm just really excited about us approving our superintendent's contract. I'm really excited to welcome Bill August to the district. It's going to be a little while before he can join us in his official role because he has to be released from Big Spring, but very excited for him to begin and very excited for you all to get to know Bill as we have. Thanks.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
But before we adjourn, I just want to say I also am very excited about Bill August beginning soon. And just a reminder, board, if you could give Lauren and I about 5 to 10 minutes in executive session, we would really appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Fred Scott, make a motion to adjourn.